My name is Evelyn. I'm 21 years old, a university student, and for the first time in my life, I'm living alone. If I were to sum it up in one word, it would be adventure, a messy, unpredictable, and sometimes comically absurd adventure that, despite its chaos, has taught me more than I ever thought possible. Growing up, I always imagined that moving out would mirror the movies where a young woman steps into her dream apartment, strings up fairy lights, and effortlessly whips up gourmet meals while sipping coffee in a perfectly coordinated outfit. Spoiler alert: reality is far less cinematic. Living on my own has been a series of revelations no one adequately prepared me for. Did you know light bulbs don't replace themselves? Because I didn't, until I spent 2 full nights navigating my dark apartment like a bat before finally realizing I needed to buy a new one. Balancing the demands of school, part-time job, and attempting to maintain some semblance of a social life has been, let's just call it a masterclass in survival. I'm studying business management, though on most days, it feels like I'm just managing to stay afloat. My part-time job at a bustling coffee shop is a comedy of its own. There's something about coffee that brings out the quirks in people. Just last week, a customer asked for a triple shot, no foam, extra hot, sugar-free caramel macchiato with almond milk, and then complained it didn't taste like a milkshake. I plastered on my most professional smile while inwardly questioning my life choices. Despite the madness, independence has always been a part of who I am. Growing up in a modest home, my parents instilled in me the value of hard work and self-reliance. Living alone, however, has pushed those lessons to the next level. I've learned to cook badly, clean when absolutely necessary, and stretch my budget by surviving on instant noodles for days at a time. Oh, and laundry? Let's just say I now have a lovely pink shirt that used to be white. Apparently, separating colors and whites isn't just a suggestion. Through all the ups and downs, I've embraced the responsibility that comes with running my own life. My one-bedroom apartment is my tiny kingdom, and I'm the self-proclaimed CEO. This mostly means I decide whether dinner will be a well-balanced meal or a bowl of cereal and toast. Spoiler alert: cereal often wins. One particular afternoon stands out amidst the chaos. I had just finished a long, caffeine-fueled shift at the coffee shop and felt like my brain was swimming in a sea of espresso, with no energy left for anything extravagant, and let's face it, no money either. I decided to clear my head with a walk around the neighborhood. As I wandered past rows of charming little houses, humming a tune wildly off-key, a voice called out, stopping me in my tracks. "Hello there." Looking up, I saw an elderly man seated on the porch of a house that seemed almost too grand for this modest neighborhood. He had a kind smile, neatly combed gray hair, and sharp eyes that somehow managed to notice my mismatched socks. "Hi," I replied hesitantly. "Let's be real. Who even talks to strangers these days?" "I'm Gas," he said warmly, reclining in his chair with the kind of confidence that suggested he owned the whole street. "Your neighbor. I've seen you around but never had the chance to say hello." "Oh," I said, blinking. I hadn't noticed him before, but he spoke like we were old friends. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Gas. I'm Evelyn. Just Gas, please." He chuckled. "Calling me Mr. makes me feel ancient." I nearly laughed but managed to keep it in. "All right, Gas. Nice to meet you." And just like that, our conversation began. To my surprise, it wasn't awkward at all. Gas had this easygoing way of making you feel comfortable, like you'd known him forever. He shared stories about the neighborhood, pointing out who grew the prettiest flowers, whose dog barked too much, and which houses belonged to nosy neighbors. Hint, all of them. "I've been here for years," he said proudly. "This place has changed a lot. Back in my day, we didn't have all these fancy coffee shops and gyms." "Well, you're lucky," I replied, laughing. "I work at one of those coffee shops, and let me tell you, some people are way too passionate about their foam." Gas laughed, a deep, hearty sound that felt like a warm hug. For a moment, his expression softened as he mentioned his late wife. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. Instead, I smiled and nodded, letting him decide whether to share more. Something about Gas told me he wasn't the kind of man who spilled his feelings to just anyone. That simple walk turned into a surprisingly heartfelt chat with my most intriguing neighbor, one I wouldn't soon forget. Few weeks later, I ran into Gas again. This time, he wasn't on his porch. Instead, he was strolling down the street with the fluffiest, most adorable dog I'd ever seen. A little marshmallow on 4 legs. "Evelyn," Gas called, waving one hand while the other held the leash. "Hi, Gas," I replied, walking over. He gave me a playful glare. "What did I say about calling me mister? You're making me feel like I'm 100 years old." I laughed. "All right, Gas." The dog wagged its tail so enthusiastically I thought it might take off. Bending down, I scratched behind its ears, and the little fluff ball immediately rewarded me with slobbery kisses. "This is Max," Gas said proudly. "He's my little companion. Sometimes I think he's the only one who really listens to me." I laughed, unsure if he was joking or serious. "Well, Max is definitely a good listener." Max barked happily as if to agree. Moments like these remind me that life's richness isn't always found in grand plans or flashy adventures. Sometimes, it's in the quiet joy of meeting someone new, the warmth of an unexpected laugh, or the comfort of a fluffy dog named Max. We started chatting, and before I knew it, I was swept back into the easy rhythm of Gas's company. He had this effortless way of making you laugh. His humor wasn't forced or calculated. It was genuine, like he couldn't help but be funny. His stories were like vivid little snapshots from his life, each one more entertaining than the last. He told me about the time he got stuck in a tree while trying to impress a girl at a summer camp, hanging upside down like a clumsy bat until the counselors came to rescue him. Then there was the tale of Max, his loyal but mischievous dog, who once managed to swipe an entire loaf of freshly baked bread off the counter without anyone noticing until crumbs covered the floor. For a while, it felt like nothing else in the world mattered. Gas had this magnetic energy that made you forget your worries. But then, in the middle of one of his stories, he suddenly paused. His expression softened, and his voice dropped to a quieter, more serious tone. "Evelyn," he said, looking directly into my eyes with a smile that felt both warm and disarming. "I like you. You're kind, smart, and beautiful. I'd love for us to be close friends." For a second, I froze. My brain scrambled to process his words, doing mental cartwheels like a gymnast at a competition. Thank you, Gas," I managed to say, my voice a little higher than usual. His smile widened, but there was a tenderness in his eyes now. "I know this might seem out of the blue, but my wife and we've grown distant. She doesn't give me the attention I need anymore. I could really use a friend like you." My heart skipped a beat, and not in the romantic way. A storm of emotion swirled inside me: flattery, confusion, and the unmistakable hint of a red flag waving frantically in the back of my mind. I wanted to choose my words carefully. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but I also knew I needed to be firm. "Gas," I said slowly, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "I don't think that's a good idea." He sighed, leaning back slightly. There was a flicker of disappointment on his face, but it wasn't anger or frustration. If anything, he looked like he understood. "I get it," he said quietly, "but think about it. I could help you too. You know, being a student isn't easy. I'd be happy to support you." Before I could even respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wad of cash. Without hesitation, he held it out to me. "Here," he said casually, as if he were offering me a cup of coffee, "for your groceries or whatever you need." I stared at the money, completely taken aback. Was this some kind of test? A trick? Was there a hidden camera somewhere, waiting to capture my reaction? Gas, however, looked entirely sincere. His eyes held no trace of malice or manipulation, just a strange kind of earnestness that made it impossible to figure out his true intentions. After what felt like an eternity, I hesitantly took the money. "Thank you," I murmured, unsure of what else to say. My voice barely registered above a whisper. As I walked home, the evening air cool against my skin, My mind raced with unanswered questions. Max's cheerful barking faded into the distance. But Gas's words replayed in my head on a loop. What did he really want from me? Was he just lonely? Or was there something more? And most importantly, how was I supposed to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions he had stirred up? For the next few days, Gas lingered in my thoughts. I couldn't shake the memory of his kind smile, his charming laugh, and, of course, the adorable Max who seemed to have adopted me as his new best friend. But beneath the surface, there was a nagging discomfort. Gas was married. That little fact hovered over me like a persistent shadow, whispering warnings every time I tried to push it aside. One evening, as I sat on my couch eating noodles straight from the pot, don't judge me, it had been a long day, my phone buzzed, interrupting my train of thought. Hello, I answered, slurping a noodle. Evelyn. Gas's familiar, deep voice came through the line. Can we meet? Sure, I said, curious but wary. What could he want now? We agreed to meet at a cozy cafe nearby, the kind of place where the furniture felt a little wobbly but the coffee was worth every penny. When I arrived, Gas was already there, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine, confident, polished, and completely at ease. He greeted me with that same warm smile, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt for doubting his intentions. Hi, Evelyn, he said, his voice as smooth as the coffee he was sipping. Hi, Gas, I replied, taking the seat across from him. He didn't waste time with small talk. Instead, he delved into a story about his life, his successes, his struggles, and the cracks in his marriage. My wife and I, he began, his tone laced with sadness. We've lost our connection. It's like living with a stranger. I just want someone to talk to, someone who understands me. I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite his wealth and charm, Gas seemed achingly lonely, like someone who had everything except the one thing that truly mattered. Okay, I said finally, after a long pause. We can be friends. His face lit up, his eyes sparkling with a joy I hadn't seen before. For a moment, I felt like I'd made the right decision. But then, as I sipped my coffee, Gas leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Evelyn, he said softly, can I ask you something? Sure, I said, completely unaware of the curveball he was about to throw. Would you like to go to a hotel with me tonight? Just for some fun. I nearly choked on my coffee. My heart pounded in my chest as his words echoed in my ears. What in the world is happening right now? I stammered, caught between shock and disbelief. I mean, he added quickly, his tone still gentle. Only if you're comfortable. No pressure. I stared at him, my mind racing with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. Part of me was curious. Gas was undeniably charming, and his interest in me was flattering. But the other part, the one still clinging to reason, screamed that this was a terrible idea. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I surprised even myself. Okay, I said hesitantly, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's see if you're as good in bed as you are at talking. Gas beamed, his grin wide and infectious, an odd mix of surprise and unrestrained joy lighting up his face. Meanwhile, I sat there, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, wondering how on earth I had just agreed to this. It wasn't a decision I planned or even anticipated, but here I was, tumbling headfirst into the unknown. As we stepped out of the cafe together, the cool evening air brushed against my skin, making my heart race. A nervous energy bubbled up inside me, the kind you feel when you're about to dive into something completely unexpected. Part of me was anxious. Was this a mistake? But another part of me was undeniably curious. Whatever this was, it was sure to be an adventure, and it was nothing like how I imagined my evening would unfold. When we reached the hotel, Gas's excitement was almost palpable. He walked with a spring in his step, his eyes bright, and his entire demeanor radiated pure, unfiltered joy. He looked like a kid who had just been handed the keys to a candy store. The hotel itself was elegant, not over-the-top luxurious, but leagues beyond the modest motels I was used to on family road trips. The polished floors gleamed under the soft glow of ambient lighting, and a faint floral scent lingered in the air. As if the place had been lightly kissed by spring, it felt surreal, like I'd wandered into the set of a romantic movie. "This is beautiful," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my pulse betrayed me with its rapid beat. Gas turned to me with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. "I'm glad you think so," he said, his voice brimming with pride, as if he'd handpicked every detail himself. Inside the room, the atmosphere was pristine. The bed was adorned with crisp white linens and pillows so plump they practically invited you to sink into them. Freshly folded towels were stacked neatly by the bathroom door, and a tiny chocolate rested on the bedside table. A small but charming detail that made me smile. "Make yourself at home," Gas said warmly, closing the door behind us. "You should take a bath, relax and refresh a bit." I hesitated, unsure if I should, but his reassuring smile softened my doubts. "All right," I said quietly, heading to the bathroom. And oh, what a bathroom it was. The bathtub alone was a marvel, large enough to wade in, and the counters were lined with elegant toiletries that smelled of lavender and eucalyptus. I ran my hand over the robe hanging nearby. It was impossibly soft, the kind of luxury I'd only seen in magazines. As I filled the tub, steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the soothing aroma of lavender through the air. It felt indulgent, almost otherworldly. After soaking in the blissful water, I stepped out feeling rejuvenated, wrapping myself in the plush robe. When I returned to the room, Gas had taken my advice and freshened up as well. The transformation was striking. His gray hair, now neatly combed, framed a face that seemed to glow with newfound vitality. It was as if the years had momentarily rolled back, leaving a confident, relaxed version of him standing before me. We sat together on the edge of the bed, and our conversation began with the usual pleasantries: work, school, funny anecdotes about his culinary misadventures. But as the minutes ticked by, the dialogue deepened, peeling back layers of formality. Gas shared stories of his younger days, the ambitions he once had, and the lessons he'd learned through life's twists and turns. "You know," he said, his voice soft and contemplative, "I haven't felt this alive in years." His words caught me off guard. I hesitated, unsure how to respond, so I simply nodded, hoping my silence would convey understanding. Before I realized it, the space between us shrank. One moment we were talking, and the next, we found ourselves lying side by side. To my surprise, Gas had an air of tenderness and attentiveness that disarmed me completely. He wasn't rushed or careless. Every touch, every word felt deliberate, meaningful. "Wow," I breathed out, breaking the silence. Gas chuckled, his laughter rich and warm. "Is that a good wow or a bad one?" "Definitely a good one," I replied, laughing along with him, my cheeks flushing. And then it happened. He leaned in, his gaze locking with mine, his eyes twinkling like he held the universe's best-kept secrets. "Evelyn," he murmured, his voice low and steady, "you're absolutely incredible." Before I could respond, his lips brushed mine, a soft, lingering kiss that caught me off guard in the best way possible. It wasn't hurried or dramatic, just simple and real. For a moment, my mind raced. Was I doing this right? Should I close my eyes? Open them? But before I could overthink, I let go and kissed him back, sinking into the moment. The world outside faded into nothingness. There were no deadlines, no traffic sounds, no worries about tomorrow, just us, cocooned in this fleeting bubble of time. Gas had a way of making everything else disappear, his enthusiasm and joy creating a space where nothing else mattered. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" I teased, laughing softly. "Of course," he replied, his grin wide and unabashed. A moment like this doesn't come around every day. His energy was contagious, and I found myself marveling at him. This man who had gone from being the reserved neighbor to someone bursting with life and passion. "You're something else," I said, shaking my head in amazement. "And you," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "are unforgettable." The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream, an intoxicating blend of laughter, whispered words, and shared secrets. Gas's charm wasn't just in his words but in how he made me feel seen, heard, and cherished, like I was the only person in the world who mattered in that moment. By the time we finally paused, allowing ourselves to catch our breath, both of us were grinning like children who had just uncovered a treasure map and embarked on the greatest adventure imaginable. Our laughter echoed in the stillness around us, a shared sound of exhilaration and something deeper, connection. "Well, Gas," I said between breaths, my chest still heaving slightly, "you certainly have a knack for making an evening unforgettable." He leaned back, his eyes twinkling with mischief and warmth. "And you, Evelyn," he replied with a chuckle, "are one of a kind." We both burst out laughing, the kind of laughter that eases the soul and chips away at barriers. In that fleeting moment, I felt something new, an inexplicable sense of ease, like I could finally let my guard down. It was strange and entirely unexpected, yet it was undeniably wonderful. Building a bond, the days that followed turned into weeks, and in that time, Gas and I grew closer. It started with casual phone calls, him reaching out whenever he needed someone to talk to. I found myself looking forward to these conversations, as if they were the highlight of my day. Soon, they turned into impromptu meetings. Sometimes, we would meet at his place or at a quiet coffee shop where we could sit for hours, lost in conversation. Gas surprised me with his thoughtfulness. Beneath the confident exterior was a man who treated me with genuine kindness and respect. He listened when I spoke and offered perspectives that made me rethink my own ideas. Slowly, I began to see sides of him that he rarely revealed to others, a vulnerable, deeply reflective side. One afternoon, he called me with an unusual request. "Evelyn," he began, his voice laced with both hesitation and excitement, "I want you to be my +1 at a business event. An evening to remember." First, I hesitated. Attending a high-profile event filled with strangers wasn't exactly my idea of a comfortable evening, but his enthusiasm was contagious. And eventually, I agreed. The night of the event, I stood in front of the mirror, feeling both nervous and out of place in the elegant dress I had borrowed. Gas arrived to pick me up, and as he saw me, his expression softened. "You look stunning," he whispered, his voice sincere. The evening turned out to be magical. The grandeur of the ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, and the hum of sophisticated conversation initially overwhelmed me. But Gas never left my side. He introduced me to his colleagues with pride and guided me through the unfamiliar world of corporate elegance. At one point, he took my hand and led me onto the dance floor. We moved together under the soft glow of the chandeliers. And for a brief, timeless moment, I forgot about everything, the whispers of judgment, our age difference, and my own insecurities. It was just us, swaying to the music, sharing a moment of pure connection, an unlikely partnership. As the weeks rolled on, Gas began leaning on me more. Whenever he felt lonely or overwhelmed, he would call, and I always found myself answering, ready to listen. Our relationship grew deeper, and though it remained unconventional, I started to cherish the bond we had formed. Gas, ever generous, helped ease my financial burdens without hesitation. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about rent or groceries. This newfound stability allowed me to focus on my studies, and for that, I was endlessly grateful. But his support wasn't just financial, it was emotional, too. One day, he called me in distress. "Evelyn, I need you to come over," he said, his voice unsteady. When I arrived, I found him sitting alone in his study, his face etched with worry. "What's wrong?" I asked softly, taking a seat beside him. He sighed deeply. "Another argument with my wife," he admitted. "She doesn't understand me anymore." For the first time, I saw how deeply his struggles weighed on him. Gas wasn't just the confident man I had come to know. He was also vulnerable, carrying burdens that few could see. "You're a good man, Gas," I said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't let this break you." He turned to me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Evelyn. You have no idea how much you mean to me." reflections, and realizations. Despite our growing closeness, I couldn't ignore the questions that lingered in the back of my mind. Where was this relationship heading? What did Gas truly want from me? And what did I want from him? One day, I finally voiced my thoughts. Gas, I began carefully. What do you really want from me? He looked at me, his gaze steady and sincere. I want you to be happy, Evelyn. You've brought so much light into my life, and I want to do the same for you. His words touched me deeply, but they also forced me to confront the truth of our connection. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something far more complex. A choice to stay. In the end, I chose to stay by Gas's side, not because of the financial support, but because of the bond we had built. He had become a part of my life in ways I never expected, and the thought of walking away felt unbearable. Looking back, I realized that life has a way of creating connections in the most unexpected places. Gas and I had found something rare and real, even if it didn't fit the conventional mold. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update interesting content. Thank you and see you in the next videos.